A fist closed around a man's collar and yanked him clean off his feet. His boots kicked at nothing. The back of his skull cracked against a brick wall and he went limp. A second man reached for a knife. He never got it out of his pocket. One elbow caught him across the jaw and dropped him into a row of trash cans. Nobody in the alley moved. Nobody breathed. The man doing the throwing wasn't even winded. Gray beard, leather cut, a patch on the back that said President. His name was Cole Rourke, and for 20 long years the streets of Reno had learned to step carefully around him. But 3 days later, a 3-year-old boy would quietly walk into his office, point at a faded photo, and ask one simple question that broke him in half. What was that question? Stay with me on this one. The Iron Vultures ran their club out of an old truck depot on the east side of town. Cinderblock walls, a yard full of chrome, a garage that smelled like oil and cold coffee. For 11 years, the man who ran it was Cole Rourke, and in all that time, nobody had ever seen him back down from anything. Now understand something about Cole. He wasn't a loud man. That's what threw people. They expected a biker boss to yell, to swagger, to fill a room with noise. Cole did the opposite. When Cole got quiet, that's when you needed to worry. His men had a saying about it. They'd say, when the old man stops talking, start praying. He was 60 years old and built like a door, thick through the chest, hands like bricks. A gray beard he kept short, and eyes that had seen things most people only read about. 2 tours overseas, a rank he never talked about, a folded flag somewhere in his past that he never once mentioned to a living soul. He had 2 things he loved in this world, and only 2. The first was a hound dog named Diesel, big, droopy, sad-eyed thing the color of rust. Diesel followed Cole everywhere, sat under his desk when he did paperwork, rode in the sidecar when Cole ran errands. That dog loved Cole the way only a dog can love a hard man completely and without one single question. The second thing was a photograph. Cole kept it in the inside pocket of his cut, right over his heart. It was old now, worn soft at the corners, the color gone pale. It showed 2 men in the sun somewhere far away and dusty. One was Cole, younger, no gray in his beard yet. The other was a kid. A young Marine, maybe 22, grinning like the whole world was a joke he was in on. Dark hair, a gap in his front teeth, an easy, open face. Nobody at the club knew who the kid was. They'd learned not to ask. One time, a new prospect had reached for it off the desk, just curious, and Cole had closed a hand around the boy's wrist so fast and so hard the kid dropped it and never touched anything of Cole's again. That was the only time anyone saw Cole react to the photo at all, so the club knew this. Cole had a picture. The picture mattered. And you did not ask. That's the man we're talking about. Now that spring the clubhouse needed cleaning. Simple as that. 20 grown men and a dog, and the place had got to where you didn't want to touch the bathrooms. One of the guys knew a woman looking for work. Quiet, reliable, kept to herself. Needed the money bad, he said. Cole said fine, bring her by. Her name was Marisol Vega. She showed up on a Tuesday in a coat 2 sizes too big, holding the hand of a little boy. She was small, maybe 30, dark hair pulled back tight. She had the kind of face that had learned not to ask for anything, because asking had never once gone well for her. She wouldn't meet Cole's eyes at first. She stood in the middle of that garage full of bearded men and looked like she was bracing to be turned away. The boy was 3. Big brown eyes, a toy truck clutched in one fist. He hid behind his mother's leg and stared up at all these huge men like they were mountains. "This is Diego," Marisol said. Her voice was soft. "I don't have anyone to watch him. I know it's not ideal. If it's a problem, I understand." Cole looked at the boy. The boy looked back and didn't look away, which not many grown men managed. "It's not a problem," Cole said, and that was that. Marisol started the next morning. Here's the thing about Marisol. She worked like the job was the last one she'd ever get. She scrubbed floors nobody had cleaned in years. She never touched a man's things. She never asked about the bikes, the business, the guns some of the boys carried like phones. She came in, she worked. She took her cash at the end of the week and she left with her boy on her hip. And the men, rough as they were, softened around her without meaning to. They started watching their language. They started leaving her tips folded under the coffee pot. One of them fixed the busted seat on Diego's little umbrella stroller without a word. But there was something under all of it. Something Marisol carried. You could see it in the way she flinched when a door slammed. The way she watched the parking lot through the window. The way she never, ever talked about Diego's father. She was running from something. Cole knew that look. He'd worn it himself once a long time ago. He didn't ask, not his business. He figured she'd talk when she was ready or never, and either way was fine. He had no idea at all that this quiet woman scrubbing his floors was about to walk him straight back into the worst day of his life. That the little boy playing with a plastic truck in the corner was carrying a secret in his blood. And that a photograph he'd guarded for a decade was about to speak. It happened on a Thursday. Marisol was cleaning the front offices, and Diego, being 3, wandered. That's what 3-year-olds do. One minute he was rolling his truck along the baseboard by his mother's feet, and the next he was gone down the hall, quiet as smoke, following the sound of a dog's tags jingling. Diesel had gone into Cole's office. Diego followed the dog. Cole was at his desk doing what he did most mornings, going over numbers, a cup of black coffee cooling at his elbow. He heard the little footsteps and looked up, and there was Diego in the doorway, one hand on Diesel's big rusty head, patting him like they were old friends. Cole almost smiled. Almost. He wasn't a man who smiled easy, but a kid and a dog will get you close. "Hey there, little man," he said low. "You lost." Diego didn't answer. He'd stopped patting the dog. He was staring at the desk, at the photo. See, Cole had taken it out that morning. He did that sometimes on the bad mornings, the ones where the memory sat heavy on him. He'd take the photo out of his cut and stand it up against his coffee cup and just look at it for a while. It was standing there now, that young Marine grinning in the sun. Diego walked to the desk. He was too short to see over it, so he reached up on his toes and put one small finger right on the glass. And he said, "Why do you have a picture of my Tio Danny?" Cole went still, not the still of a man who didn't hear, the still of a man whose whole body had just turned to stone. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. Something cracked. "What did you say?" he said, and his voice came out wrong, rough, barely there. Diego, who did not understand that the ground had just opened under this giant of a man, tapped the glass again with his little finger. "That's Tio Danny," he said, happy as anything. "Mama has one too. He went to heaven." Mama cries. Now let me tell you what that name did to Cole Rourke. The Marine in that photo was named Daniel Vega, Corporal Daniel Vega, and 10 years ago, in a country full of dust and heat on the other side of the world, that grinning kid had died in Cole Rourke's arms. Nobody was supposed to know his name. Not here. Not in this life Cole had built after. He had carried that name like a stone in his chest for a decade, and he had never once said it out loud, because saying it out loud made it real, and real was more than he could stand. And now a 3-year-old was standing in his office saying it like it was nothing. Tio Danny, Uncle Danny. Cole set the coffee cup down very slowly, because his hand had started to shake, and he did not want the boy to see. "Diego," he said, "your Uncle Danny Vega, that's his last name. Vega." Diego nodded. "Same as me. Diego Vega." He grinned, proud of himself for knowing it. Cole came out from behind that desk and got down on one knee in front of the boy. He was a huge man kneeling, and even kneeling he was taller than the child. Diesel pressed in close against his side, whining low, the way dogs do when they feel a storm coming off the person they love. "Your mama," Cole said carefully. "Marisol, Danny was her brother." "Her big brother," Diego said. "He's in heaven. I never met him. I was in Mama's tummy." He said it the way kids say things, plain and enormous. And that was when Cole Rourke understood. He'd known Daniel Vega for 6 weeks, 6 weeks in the worst place on earth. And in those 6 weeks, the kid had talked about exactly one thing more than any other: his little sister, Mari. He carried a photo too, a girl of maybe 19, and he'd show it to anyone who'd look. He'd say, "That's my Mari, I'm all she's got, I'm gonna get her out of that place, she's gonna go to college, you watch." Their parents were gone. It was just the two of them. And Danny was going to fix everything the second he got home. He never got home. And the last thing Daniel Vega ever said, the words he'd pushed out through the blood while Cole held him and screamed for a medic who was too far away, those words came back to Cole now like a hand around his throat. "Find her," Danny had said. "Promise me. Find Mari, tell her I tried." Cole had promised. Of course he'd promised. You promise a dying man anything. And then he'd come home and he'd looked, God knows he'd looked for years, but Vega is a common name. The girl had moved, changed states. Changed her life to get away from whatever she was getting away from. The trail went cold and cold and colder, and eventually a man has to stop looking or the looking eats him alive. Cole had stopped looking 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Right around the time a woman named Marisol Vega got pregnant, ran from something, and started drifting across the desert toward a truck depot in Reno, where a hound dog and a broken promise were waiting for her. Cole knelt there on the concrete floor of his office and looked at this little boy, and he saw Danny in him. The eyes, the gap where the front teeth would come in. He saw his whole life bend in a circle and touch itself at the ends. "Diego," he said, and his voice had gone very soft and very careful. "I want you to do something for me, okay? I want you to go find your mama. Tell her Mr. Cole needs to talk to her. Can you do that?" Diego nodded and toddled off, dragging his hand along Diesel's back on the way out. And Cole stayed on his knees a moment longer, just breathing. Then he stood, and he wiped his face with the back of one shaking hand, and he squared his shoulders, and he did what he'd trained a lifetime to do. He pulled himself together. When Marisol came to the office a minute later, drying her hands on a rag, worried her boy had broken something, Cole was standing calm behind his desk. The photo was back in his cut, over his heart. "He didn't touch anything," Cole said. "He's fine, he's a good kid." Marisol let out a breath. "I'm so sorry. He gets away from me, I'll keep him closer." "Don't," Cole said, then gentler, "it's all right, really." He almost said more. He almost said everything. The name Danny sat right there on his tongue, 10 years heavy. But he looked at her tired face, at the fear she carried like a second coat, and something told him now was not the time. Not like this. Not blurted out across a desk. This woman had been kicked by life too many times to just have her dead brother dropped on her between mopping the halls. So he swallowed it. "Take the rest of the day," he said. "You're paid up. Go home, get some rest." She blinked, surprised. People didn't give her things. "Thank you," she said quietly, and she gathered Diego and her too big coat and her bucket and she left. Cole watched her old car pull out of the lot. Then he sat down heavy in his chair and Diesel put his big head on Cole's knee, and for a long, long moment the toughest man in Reno just sat in the quiet and let his hands go still. It was over, it seemed. The storm had come and passed. He'd found her. After 10 years, the promise had a face and an address. Tomorrow he'd tell her gently. Tomorrow he'd make it right. He poured the cold coffee down the sink, patted his dog, and for the first time in a decade, Cole Rourke felt something in his chest come loose that had been locked tight for 10 years. He had no idea he was already too late. The phone rang at 4 the next morning. Cole slept light, always had. He had the phone to his ear before the second ring. It was one of his men, Tank, on watch at the front gate, and Tank's voice was tight. "Boss, the cleaning lady, Marisol, she just came through the fence on foot. She's beat up bad. She's got the kid. She's asking for you and she won't stop shaking." Cole was dressed and out the door before Tank finished the sentence. She was in the common room when he got there, and the sight of her stopped him cold. One eye swollen half shut, a split lip, a bruise coming up dark along her jaw. She had Diego wrapped up tight against her chest, and the boy was crying into her neck, and she was rocking him and staring at nothing. And here's where the whole thing changed, because this wasn't about a photograph anymore. This wasn't about grief or a promise or a memory in Cole's pocket. A man had put his hands on this woman and her child, and that meant it had turned into something Cole Rourke understood in his bones: survival. He knelt in front of her, slow, hands open, the way you approach something wounded. "Marisol," he said, "who did this?" She wouldn't look at him. "I shouldn't have come here. I didn't have anywhere. I'm sorry." "Who did this?" It came out of her in pieces. His name was Ray, Diego's father. She'd left him 2 years ago when he broke her arm when she was pregnant, and she'd run and run, and she thought she'd finally gotten far enough. But he'd found her. He always found her. He ran with a crew bad men, the kind who moved product across the state line, and Ray had shown up at her apartment that night drunk and furious and told her he was taking Diego, that the boy was his, that she'd never see him again. And when she said no, he'd shown her exactly what no cost. She'd grabbed Diego and gone out a bathroom window. She'd walked 3 miles in the dark to the only place she could think of where the men were scarier than Ray. "He's coming," she whispered. "He knows I clean here. Somebody at the bar knows. He'll come here and he'll take Diego, and there's nothing I can do. There's police reports, and he always." "Look at me," Cole said. She looked at him. And Cole Rourke made a decision right there that he'd been building toward for 10 years without knowing it. He reached into his cut. He took out the photo. He turned it around and held it up in front of her swollen, tear-streaked face. "Marisol," he said, "I need you to tell me who this is." She went still. Her one good eye focused on the little grinning Marine in the sun, and her hand came up slow and touched the glass the exact same way her son had the day before. "That's my brother," she breathed. "That's Danny. Why do you have?" "Because I was there," Cole said. His voice broke on it and he let it. "I was holding him when he died, Marisol. Your brother saved my life twice before he lost his own. And the last thing he ever said to me, the last words out of that boy's mouth, were, 'Find my sister. Find Mari. Tell her I tried.'" She was shaking her head, tears running into the split of her lip. "No," she kept saying. No. "I looked for you for 7 years. I couldn't find you." Cole's own eyes were wet now, and he did not care who saw. "And then you walked into my clubhouse and scrubbed my floors for a month, and I never knew. Your boy told me. Yesterday." He pointed at Danny and called him uncle. Cole let out a sound that was half a laugh and half something that had been buried a decade. "You're not the cleaning lady, Marisol. You're Danny Vega's little sister. Which means, as of right now, there is not one thing on this earth that is going to touch you or that boy while I'm still breathing." She fell forward into him then, this stranger, this sister, and she cried the way people cry when they've been carrying a thing alone for far too long. And Cole held her and the boy both in his 2 brick arms, and Diesel leaned against all 3 of them, and the whole clubhouse of hard men stood around in silence, and not one of them was ashamed of the water in their eyes. Now, if you've made it this far, if this story is getting to you the way it's getting to me, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps, and it tells me you want more stories like this one. All right. Because what happened next, I need you to hear all of it. Cole stood up, and when he stood, He was not a grieving man anymore. He was the president of the Iron Vultures, and his face had gone to that terrible quiet his men knew to fear. "Tank," he said, "wake everybody. Lock the gate. Marisol, you and Diego are going to the back room, and Diesel's going with you, and nobody comes through that door but me." He turned to his men, who were already moving. "We've got a man named Ray coming to take a child out of my house tonight. Anybody got a problem standing in the way of that?" Not one hand went up. They came just before dawn. 6 of them in 2 trucks, headlights off, thinking they'd roll up quiet on some woman hiding at a biker bar. They figured a few tattooed guys, maybe a scuffle, and they'd grab the kid and go. That's the mistake. That's the mistake men like Ray always make. They think everybody plays by their rules. They rolled through the front gate and found it open, which should have told them something. It didn't. Ray got out of the lead truck first. Big man, shaved head, gun in his waistband where you could see it because he wanted it seen. Behind him, 5 more spreading out across the yard. The floodlights came on all at once. And Ray stopped because the whole yard was full of men, 20 of them, standing in a loose half circle, calm, quiet, waiting, chains, bats, a couple with worse. And out front, alone, hands loose at his side, stood Cole Rourke. "You lost," Cole said. "Ray recovered fast, you had to give him that." He put a sneer on. "I want the woman and my kid. This ain't your business, old man. Hand 'em over and we're gone. You don't, and my people know where every one of you lives." Cole took 1 step forward. "Let me tell you about the kid you came for," he said, and his voice carried across that whole silent yard. That boy's uncle was a United States Marine named Daniel Vega. Corporal Vega died face down in the dirt 8,000 miles from home, so that garbage like you could sleep safe in a country you've never once given a thing to. I held him while he did it, and with the last breath in his body, that boy asked me to look after his family. Cole took another step. Ray's hand drifted toward his waistband. "So no," Cole said, "you're not taking that woman. You're not taking that child. And that gun you're reaching for, son, you will not clear it." For a second nobody moved. The whole world held still. Then Ray went for it. He was fast. But Cole Rourke had been fast in places that made Reno look like a playground. And old as he was, some things the body never forgets. He closed the distance before the gun came level and got 1 brick hand around Ray's wrist and drove it up toward the sky. The shot went off into the dark. And then Cole's forehead came down and broke Ray's nose with a crack you heard across the yard, and the gun hit the gravel, and Ray went to his knees with blood pouring down his face. The yard exploded. Ray's men lunged, and 20 Iron Vultures met them, and for about 90 seconds it was chains and fists and shouting under the floodlights. But it was never going to be a fight. 6 against 20 on ground they didn't know, against men who'd have died before they let anyone past. It was over almost before it started. Ray's crew ended up on the gravel, groaning, disarmed, done. Cole hauled Ray up by the collar the exact same way he'd hauled a man up in that alley 3 days before. But he didn't throw him. He held him close, nose to broken nose. "Here's what happens now," Cole said low, just for Ray. "You're going to sign away every claim you ever pretended to have on that boy. Tonight, my lawyer's already writing it. And then you're going to leave the state of Nevada, and you're never going to think Marisol Vega's name again. Because if you do, if you so much as drive down her street, there will not be enough of you left to fill that photo in my pocket. Do we understand each other?" Ray, bleeding, beaten, staring into the eyes of a man who meant every single word, understood. The police came, called by Cole himself because Cole did things right. 6 men with weapons, a documented history of assault, a protective order Marisol had filed and Ray had violated. Ray went away. Not forever, the law being what it is, but long enough. And when he came out, he was smart enough to keep going, right out of the state, and Marisol Vega never saw his face again. But that's not the part I want to leave you with. Because the fight was never really the point. The point came after, when the yard was quiet again and the trucks were towed and the sun was coming up gray over the mountains. Cole went to the back room. Marisol was sitting on the cot with Diego finally asleep in her lap and Diesel stretched out across her feet like a guard. She looked up at him. "Is it?" "It's over," Cole said. "He's gone, he's not coming back, I promise you that, and I don't break promises." He paused. "Not anymore." He sat down slow on a crate across from her. And then in the quiet with the boy sleeping between them, Cole told her everything. All of it. The heat and the dust. Danny's laugh. The photo he carried of a girl of 19 he swore he was going to save. The way he talked about her college, her future. A whole life he was going to build for her the minute he got home. And the last day. Cole didn't spare himself and he didn't spare her because she'd earned the truth, all of it. He told her how her brother died and that he hadn't died alone, and that his very last thought in this world had been her. Marisol cried, quiet so as not to wake Diego, and when Cole finished, she reached over and took his big scarred hand in both of her small ones. "You did find me," she said. "It took 10 years, but you found me." Cole couldn't answer that. He just held onto her hand. Then he reached into his cut one more time, and he took out the photo, and he pressed it into her palm and closed her fingers over it. "I've carried this 10 years, he said. "It's yours now, he was your blood, it should have always been yours." But Marisol shook her head and pressed it right back into his hand. "No," she said, "you keep carrying him, you've done it this long, and now." She looked down at her sleeping son. "Now you've got somewhere to bring him home to." That's how Marisol Vega and her boy came to live under the protection of the Iron Vultures. She never scrubbed another floor for them. Cole wouldn't hear of it. There was a widow's fund the club kept, money set aside for the families of brothers who'd fallen, and Cole declared, with nobody daring to argue, that a fallen Marine sister counted. She went back to school, the way Danny always swore she would. 2 years later, she stood on a stage in a cap and gown, and there was a whole row of enormous bearded men in leather cuts in the audience, and every one of them was crying, and Cole Rourke was crying hardest of all. And Diego. Diego grew up with 20 uncles and a hound dog and a grandfather in everything but blood. He learned to ride in the sidecar next to Diesel. He learned that the world had scary men in it, but that some of the scariest-looking men were the safest place you could ever stand. And when he was old enough, Cole sat him down and told him about the real Uncle Danny, the Marine in the photo, the hero he was named to honor without anyone even knowing it. Cole never did stop carrying that photograph over his heart, but it changed somehow. For 10 years it had been a wound, a thing that hurt to look at. Now when he took it out, he'd look at that grinning kid in the sun and he'd think, "I did it, Danny. I found her. She's all right. She's better than all right. And there's a little Vega running around my clubhouse right now driving everybody crazy, and he's got your smile. You remember how this started. A fist. A man thrown against a wall. 20 years of a city learning to step around a hard, quiet, dangerous man. Here's the thing nobody understood about Cole Rourke, until a 3-year-old with a plastic truck walked into his office and pointed at a photo. Those hands, the ones that had broken so much, they'd been waiting his whole life for something to protect. He just didn't know it yet. A dying boy asked a stranger to find his sister, and it took 10 years, a cleaning job, a wandering toddler, and one impossible question. But that promise got kept, every word of it. Some things, it turns out, do find their way home.